This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. It's just about 10 o'clock on another Wednesday. And I think we're just about getting ready to start our episode 15 of Preservation Conversations. We just wanted to take a moment and thank you all for joining us today live. Those who are listening in with us right now, and also those who might be listening either through PM's website or on our YouTube channel later on. So happy July. It's incredible to think that July is almost over at this point. And we're already on our 15th episode of Preservation Conversations. And the topic we're going to be discussing today is entitled, "What is a circuit rider and when do I need them?" And we're having our very special guest speakers, Preservation Mass's own circuit riders, Stacia, Caplanson, and Jeff Gonyeau. But before we get started, just a couple of things to remind people. If you're listening live, we ask that you please mute your phones. It just helps keep background noise down, and because this is being recorded. If at any time during the course of the conversation you have a question, you can feel free to send it via the chat feature. It looks like a little conversation bubble on your GoToMeeting console. We're going to reserve time at the end of the conversation for questions. And should we have more questions than we have time to actually answer, fear not, we will save the chat log and we'll do our best to get questions back to you. And as you heard from that lovely GoToMeeting voice, this is being recorded and will be posted to our website and our YouTube channel for future reference. So it's incredible to think that we started these on April 1st. Preservation Conversations were just a way to positively connect, communicate, and share ideas, suggestions, questions. Really, it was meant to be an informal way for Preservation Mass to try to meet our mission while we were all working remotely, but it's become a great educational tool and a fun way to connect and share good examples and share insight and information. And we hope you find today's presentation just as inspiring and helpful. And as I said, we are going to be talking with our preservation circuit riders today. We're going to delve into a little bit of the history of the Circuit Rider program and then hear live from both Stacia and Jeff as to a little bit about their work across the state, some trends they're seeing, issues, helpful tips and insights to get the most out of your working and collaboration with the Circuit Rider. So what is a circuit rider and when do I need them? We often get questions about what is a circuit rider. And as I said, we have special guest speakers, Stacia Caplanson, who is our Central and Western Massachusetts circuit rider, and Jeff Gonyeau, who is our Eastern Mass circuit rider. And also on Jim Igo, President of Preservation Massachusetts, myself, I'm Erin Kelly, Associate Director, and I'm not sure if, I didn't see his name on there, but hopefully we will also be joined, as we have been throughout this entire series by Chris Skelly, Director of Local Government Programs for the Massachusetts Historical Commission. So just to give everybody a brief history, if you've been to Preservation Massachusetts website, if you've heard, if you've attended one of these conversations, if you've seen any of our programs or over the past, really over the past over 10 years, you will have heard us talk about circuit riders. But what exactly is a circuit rider? So a circuit rider, the beginnings of circuit riding, a preservation circuit rider, goes all the way back to the state of Vermont. I believe, I'm wanting to say in probably the mid-90s. The Preservation Trust of Vermont, which is the statewide nonprofit organization for the state of Vermont, their executive director came up with an idea for a new type of program that would be able to deliver face-to-face preservation guidance, support, and resources directly to people that were in need of it. So they actually created this program where they had two part-time individuals that didn't work in an office. They actually usually worked out of their home, but their whole, purpose for being was to be out in the field. It was to be meeting directly with advocates that were facing challenges, that had questions, that were dealing with projects. And these circuit riders could actually be there, be on site, and actually face-to-face provide them with assistance and guidance that would ultimately strengthen grassroots constituency and really build preservation support and strengthen the community from the ground up. So it really began in Vermont, and we know things operate very differently in Vermont than they do here in Massachusetts, but we had, over the course of many years, had heard about circuit riders, had myself and Gonyeau and our staff in our collaborations with our fellow New England statewides had heard amazing stories from these circuit riders, and it just really was a great way for them to be able to get into communities and assist people right at the local level without having to deal with giving information and advice over the phone or through an email. So we were extremely intrigued. And beginning in about 2005, 2006, we started seeing a few other programs. The state of Vermont implemented a circuit rider program, and then the following year, the state of New Hampshire implemented a circuit rider program. In preservation, especially amongst preservation organizations, we like to think that copying is the sincerest, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And if it's why reinvent the wheel? If there's a program that could possibly work for us, how can we bring it to Massachusetts? And at the time, our offices were still in Boston. And even though Massachusetts, it seems it's a small state, there's an awful lot that's here. And it was sometimes very difficult and challenging for us as an organization to really feel like we could assist people that were in need. If it was just dealing with phone calls and emails, or we would get requests to attend meetings or come to site visits, and with the timeline and logistics and location, it just wasn't possible. So we thought it could actually mean a tremendous amount to Massachusetts, that we could actually really make great strides in trying to support local advocacy efforts and strengthen preservation education and advocacy work. So in 2008, we actually launched our circuit rider program. The launch came on the heels of about a year and a half of pretty intense fundraising in collaboration with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They at the time were very interested in seeing direct field service work amongst the preservation community. So every single state in New England actually had a circuit rider program right around this time. We began with 3 circuit riders. We had the division of the state was a little bit different. We still did have our central and western Massachusetts circuit rider, because we thought that was important, and that was a location, a geographic area of Massachusetts we knew that we weren't really servicing effectively. Then we had a Boston and Metro circuit rider, and then we had a circuit rider specific to the Cape Cod and the islands. That third one came in as the result of a very last-minute grant opportunity from the National Trust. So for the first, I want to say about 4 or 5 years, we actually had 3 circuit riders working with us. And as I said, we actually had all of our fellow New England statewide organizations had circuit riders. So there was a tremendous amount of collaboration, at least in the beginning, with our circuit riders, with the circuit riders from Vermont and Connecticut, who were much more seasoned with some of the newer programs, and Maine and New Hampshire, Rhode Island. And there was a lot of give and take, a lot of learning how these circuit riders were supposed to, what they were going to really be doing. And one of the things that actually really gave the circuit riders their initial boost was the Community Preservation Act. They got a lot of their first initial requests for assistance were really coming from the Community Preservation Coalition, because we had our circuit riders out there able to answer preservation questions, and they were fielding questions from communities that had passed CPA, had questions on CPA and historic preservation projects. So that's where the circuit riders were able to step in, and it really took off from there. And I think for the first time, beginning in 2008, we were really able to feel like we could really call ourselves a statewide organization. We had people who could, we had staff that could meet face-to-face with individuals. It wasn't just being done over the phone and email, although I know we've kind of gone back to that because of the current state of affairs. But we really felt like we were able to be a better statewide organization through our circuit rider program. So the Circuit Rider program has really been, as you know, we have 2 circuit riders, and we just divide the state into East and West. Worcester tends to be the dividing line, although there is some, we kind of play with that, and more oftentimes than not, our circuit riders do a lot of collaborating together. But one of the, some of the main takeaways from our circuit rider program is it's really about collaborating with local partners. The circuit riders provide guidance, mentorship, and support, connections to local resources, and they're really helping to broaden awareness and appreciation and application of preservation in our communities as through being on-the-ground representatives of Preservation Massachusetts. And we are extremely grateful for our Jeff and Stacia and for our former circuit riders. Stacia's been with us for about 6.5 years in her position. Jeff has been with us for just over 5. So we're just very grateful for our circuit riders. And just to give you a sense of where they go throughout the year, this is actually a little visual that we took down to share with our congressional delegation in Washington, D.C. in March. And this is what we're calling touchstones. So these are areas where Preservation Mass had a pretty substantial interaction with a local, with either a project or a local issue. If a project, is, a community is colored once, there could very well have been 2 or 3 issues that we were involved with in that community. But it does give you a sense for where our circuit riders are going and involved with across the state. And this doesn't it doesn't include, simple emails, requests for information, that sort of thing. So this is really looking at kind of where they've been substantially active across Massachusetts. So. And this is just over 1 year, from 2009 into early 2020. Forgetting which year it is. Time doesn't mean anything anymore. It's just gotten really, really wonky. But this just kind of gives you a sense of where our circuit riders have been active. So after all of that history and kind of where we've been, I'm going to turn it over to the real stars of the show, our circuit riders. Beginning with Jeff in Eastern Massachusetts, and let them take it from there. So Jeff, if you want the, I know you have a couple of slides, so just let me know whenever you want those slides advanced. So take it away, Jeff.
Great, thanks a lot, Erin, and thanks for that amazing introduction. It's sometimes I forget in the day-to-day work that we're doing about the history of how it came to be that we're able to do it. So it's really interesting to hear that every once in a while. So, so as Erin said, we're living and working in a little bit of a new world at the moment. And I know Stacia probably agrees that one of the things that we miss most is actually being out riding our circuits now. We miss the site visits and the interactions that we have on the ground with people who are concerned about preservation, and who doesn't love to visit, a really interesting historic resource every once in a while. So that's, that for at least the time being has sort of been set aside, and we're focused mostly on fielding requests for assistance and information through email and phone calls. And it's been interesting in the 5 years I've been doing this, I realized that sometimes a call or a request for help might come in from a person who this is the very first time they've even kind of paid attention to a preservation issue in their community, and they're very concerned, and they're kind of just dipping their toes into the water for becoming an advocate for historic resources in their community. And then the other, at the other end of the spectrum, there are seasoned professionals who have worked in preservation for years, folks who've been involved locally in their own historical commissions or community preservation commissions for years, and maybe have a very specific technical issue that they want assistance with, or want to check in and get a second opinion on. So the types of folks that reach out to us run the gamut, and the kinds of information that people are looking for or advice that they're seeking also runs the gamut. So I've actually put together a couple of slides, and Erin, you can go to the next one if you like. Just that gives a little bit of information about if you're thinking about reaching out to either Stacia or myself with an issue, sometimes it's helpful, and it allows us to be more efficient and get back to you more quickly with more thorough help if you do just a little bit of homework in advance of making the call and reaching out, and maybe doing a little bit of digging around on your own in advance of sending that email or making that call. So I just listed a couple of things, and by no means is this a homework assignment, a pre-homework assignment, and you shouldn't feel like you can't reach out to us before you've done all these things. But if you're caring about or worrying about an individual property or individual historic resource, it's helpful for us if we know what the actual address is, where is the town, a little bit of basic information about the current ownership. And then if you've been able to poke around to find any information about its historic significance, either by looking at the MHC Macris database or through the files at your local historical commission, that's often also very helpful for us. And that's certainly something that we can help you with. And I know Stacia probably is the same way. We use Macris all the time. And we're grateful to have Chris Skelly on the call here. And Chris is always very good about reminding folks that just because there isn't anything in Macris about your historic resource of concern, that doesn't mean that it's A, not historically significant, but B, that there isn't information somewhere out there, either locally or waiting to be put up on Macris. So that's an in-process, constantly evolving collection of information, and it's just one potential source of things. So it's not the sort of be-all and end-all, although it is an extremely useful tool, and we're very lucky to have it. Another question you might ask is the property resource in a National Register local historic district? Because that means something very specific, and the types of tools that you might have at your disposal to affect a positive outcome are also colored by the resource's status, either on a National Register individually or in a local historic district. And then finally, is your local historical commission aware of the situation? And I think although it's great that we have this statewide overview and we can bring that perspective, really a lot of this stuff gets resolved locally. And we always encourage folks to make sure that they know who's on their commission, has gone to the commission's page on the town website, and are just generally familiar with the day-to-day workings and resources that are available locally. And then, Erin, if you want to go to the next slide, if you're calling or reaching out about a sort of wider global issue or locally global issue, if there's such a thing, beyond just, say, being concerned about a particular building or resource, it's also helpful for us to know, is your local historical commission aware of the issue or challenge? Again, locally, they're the sort of gatekeepers for this sort of thing. Again, we really encourage people to visit the page on the local historical commission's website to familiarize yourself with what's there. Most commissions are continuing to meet virtually, I found, and although there's a little bit of a lag with getting meeting minutes and agendas and things up on websites, I've had pretty good luck so far with the towns I've been working with and finding pretty current information. Also, besides the Historical Commission, are there any other local organizations in your community that are interested in preservation? So a historical society or a heritage organization of some kind, who might be allies if you are trying to work on a major issue, and checking on whether they're aware of the situation and involved, or if they aren't, it'd be great to let them know about it. And then finally, if it's an issue of regional or even statewide concern, is the Mass Historical Commission aware of the situation? So again, this isn't a threshold that you necessarily need to cross, but if you have thought about the issue a little bit deeply and checked out these resources, either when you're dealing with a specific building a resource or an issue, it's really helpful for us to have a little bit of this background, and allows Stacia and myself to be a little bit more efficient in the way we respond and give you the help or advice or point you to others who can help you in a more expedient way. So that's my little intro for the moment. And I don't know if Stacia would like to add anything to that or take it a step further.
Thanks, Jeff. I think you really covered a lot of, as you said, the basic information that is helpful if that share, if the person who's initiating the conversation with us has and is able to share. But as you said, certainly if an individual doesn't have that information, they're still welcome to reach out and check with us. And certainly in some areas of the state, as you mentioned, there are local preservation organizations, and in those cases, we, if contact hasn't been made, we oftentimes will try to or encourage initiation of contact with Preservation Worcester, Springfield Preservation Trust, the Dartmouth Preservation Trust. I mean, there are a number of organizations around the state that can also be really, really helpful in providing support and assistance. Because a lot of times what you're hoping to do is to build a coalition of folks who care about a historic resource. And I think a lot of the work that we do, and Jeff and I are both part-time employees of Preservation Massachusetts. A lot of what we do is talking about relationships and connections, and reaching out to a circuit rider. Oftentimes it's sort of the start of a relationship that may be of short or long duration. Looking back at the years of the circuit rider program, there's been some folks who've reached out to a circuit rider, and within a couple months, they've gotten, or even shorter, they've gotten the information they needed, the issues are resolved, things are done. In other cases, we're talking about years, if not decades, of a continued relationship. What we find is that sometimes the needs of the advocates change, sometimes new advocates come in, and the reality is that oftentimes preservation can take a long time. Initially folks will check in with us, we'll sometimes follow up, or they'll follow up with us, and sometimes we're there at the beginning of the story. As I like to say to people, it's sort of like all of us have colleagues and friends and family that we get the Christmas letter from, or periodically hear from. As circuit riders, I think what we like is to really be able to get some of those updates, and to hear how a project is going, and even hear how it ends, whether that is a positive or challenging end to something that we may have been in at the beginning.
And we do like repeat customers, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I've had people apologize for contacting me for the fourth or fifth time, and I said, don't worry about it. That's what we're here for. So we encourage, as Stacia was saying, that, continuation of relationships. And, that's, again, one of the highlights of this work, I think, is building those relationships in all these different communities.
And I think, go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, no, why don't you finish that thought, Stacia? No.
Sure. I was going to say, and I think when reaching out to a preservation circuit rider, some of the things that we have to offer is that we can share a statewide perspective. And by that, it sometimes will mean that we may know of a project that happened somewhere else in the state, or an advocate somewhere else in the state who might be willing to share their experience or share their model of a preservation success with someone who has a challenge. And that really our role is to mentor, support, help to form groups who can support each other peer to peer. We provide advice, we provide information so that the individual or group contacting us can move forward with their project. Some of the things that we do are to listen, to advise, to provide guidance. We can help to provide information on where to look, what you might not have thought about. As one community that I met with, a person said, oh, so you're sort of like a guidance counselor. And I thought that was a really good analysis, because our role is really to provide guidance. And, as a guidance counselor might give you some guidance on what to say or write in your college essay, they'll give you that advice, but then they're not going to write the essay for you. That, I think is important for folks to know when they're reaching out to us, is that we'll provide you with the tools and listen to you, help you to tell your story. But as we've all been saying, it's really the folks at the local level who have the power to really move things forward.
And speaking of those tools, even though we're sad that we can't be out riding our circuits in person anymore for the time being, one of the things that we've used this kind of in-office time for is to really kind of update and expand a lot of the resources on the Preservation Mass website. And Nick Moore in our office in particular has done an amazing job of this. And that's one place that I point people to all the time, particularly the Action Center portion of the Preservation Mass website, where there are all sorts of things there that might be helpful. And, you know, we've really tried to distill some of the things that we've learned in all these communities into, you know, a few kind of concise summaries. In particular, the roadmap to historic preservation success document is very, I think, helpful to communities. The 7 steps to a successful preservation project, where we outline in kind of broad detail how you might conceive of the sort of overarching arc of your dealing with your issue or project. So again, I encourage folks who haven't visited the website to check some of these things out, to go there and take a look and see what you can find. Our preservation directory is also there too, and I think one of the a high percentage of the requests for help that I get often are about, well, can you recommend a mason in our area who's, you know, could help with our chimney or wood shingle roofs or other, you know, kind of specific preservation services. And we have a terrific directory that's organized quite well, I think, and we frequently refer people to folks from within that directory to help them. And finally, the other resources, we have an amazing board of directors, and we call on them pretty frequently for technical assistance and advice on some of the issues that come before us. And I've been really gratified by how willing they are to go on a site visit, sometimes even with us when we are doing that, or to recommend folks who might be assistance with an issue. And that's been a terrific resource for us. And I know, Stacia, I think you agree with that, that we call on them pretty regularly.
Absolutely.
and they're always there. And I'm amazed by how much time they're able to give to us to help with some of the requests for information that we get.
And I think some of the things that I really like about the job of being a circuit rider is that it's a very diverse, the types of things we get to do are very different, that we get to learn a lot about neat places around the Commonwealth, and meet people who are really passionate about what they do. And I think that really, to me, is amazing, that there are these people who are passionate about their communities, passionate about their historic resources. Many of them are volunteers, and they're deeply committed to making change in their community or preserving things in their community. And so that is really one of the highlights for me of the job.
Great. Jeff and Stacia, thank you so much. It's, I mean, you're really, you know, you really are the face of Preservation Massachusetts for so many across the Commonwealth. And, you know, it's amazing to think that you've both been here. I think you are both our longest serving circuit riders in each of your capacity. But just, you know, how many people that you've been able to interact with, and like Jeff said, it's, you know, it's gratifying, you know, when people will return and they'll ask the circuit rider, they'll come back to them, you know, several times, and it may be on a completely different issue, or it may be a little bit farther along on the road, on their preservation path, and they're looking for a little bit more sophisticated support. So, you know, we in the office are extremely proud and so very thankful on a daily basis for Jeff and Stacia for their, you know, for being our boots on the ground, for lack of a better term, but also for their diverse experience and kind of what they bring to the role and to the organization. And I will say, you know, in the office, and I'll actually turn it over to Jim if he wants to say anything, because this is the first time in 4 months that we're actually running this preservation conversation from our office in Plymouth. socially distanced, of course, but so I didn't know if Jim wanted to chime in and say anything about the circuit riders.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is well, and we certainly do appreciate you being on the call. And Jeff and Stacia, again, thanks for your presentation. We do get together, Aaron and I do get together every other week with Jeff and Stacia, and we discuss new challenges. And to be honest with you, I think both Aaron and I enjoy our conversations with Jeff and Stacia because it's real preservation. It's not just administration. It's doing the work, I think, that Preservation Massachusetts should be doing across the state. And I think by virtue of having our circuit riders, it has made Preservation Massachusetts a true statewide preservation organization. Whether Jeff is in Harwich or whether Stacia is out, in one of the remote communities in the Berkshires, preservation work is getting done, and they both do great work. So that's.
And it's about and I love how Stacia, your quantification of the circuit rider role is really being like a guidance counselor, because we were told, from the very beginning when we were putting this program in place, this is not, the circuit riders aren't there to do it for somebody. They're really, they're not, the circuit riders kind of have to know, have to know how to get in, but they also have to know when to take a step back, to say, no, I'm, here's X, Y, and Z. I'm not going to do it for you. Like the essay letter is a perfect example. Here's some suggestions on how to write a very, a good college entrance essay, but I'm not going to write it for you. You have to do that yourself. And then you then have, the idea was that they would have that much more knowledge and comfort with preservation, that if they came back to the circuit riders for some more sophisticated questions later on, that would be fine. But the whole idea, and we were told this from day one from Vermont, Connecticut, and our other partners across New England and even the country, you really want to, we're not going to do it for you, but we will point you in the direction to the tools. And thank you, Jeff, for pointing out the enhanced resources on our website, which I'm really happy that these preservation conversations can be recorded, because I think they provide a lot of insight. I know we've covered a bunch of different topics. A few months ago, we talked about how to grow local grassroots constituencies. That's a very effective preservation conversation, and one that's good for people who are facing an issue to, and that maybe want to reach out to a circuit rider. It would be good to go back and look at that. The how-to, the roadmap to preservation success is on there, 7 steps for successful preservation project. And also Chris Kelly has shared with us some of his documents that he sends to advocates who contact him with questions. 15 questions for local advocates to ask, and 15 questions to ask about endangered and threatened resources. All of that is on our website. So if you have questions, definitely go check out our website. But also, those little how-to bullets, in order to increase your effectiveness of your interaction with Jeff and Stacia, coming with that information already and having a little bit more background that you can share with them will just mean that we're able to address your issue a little bit faster, because they are part-time. They really supposed to only work 20 hours a week, but we know it's probably a whole lot more, but they really are part-time. So if you do reach out and you don't hear back from them in a few days, they will get back to you. It's just that they are part-time. And I think, we're still very grateful that that we have our circuit rider program. We know there are other states that that do not have circuit rider programs anymore. It was very big across the country from like the mid-2000s till about 2010. But we always felt it was very important for us to keep our circuit rider program, because it really was the face. It was a presence in communities that we really felt like we needed to have. So we do have a couple of questions, and I'll just kind of I'll go through. And again, if anyone has any questions, please, we have plenty of time. Feel free to use the chat feature. If not, I can prime Jeff and Stacia with some filler questions. First one is actually rather large, and I think this one actually it does have some crossover with MHC, because it asks about National Register has a question about the National Register in it. Is there a process timeline for properties that are in process of applying for the National Register? I guess that would be Massachusetts Register too. I guess properties applying for the National Register, is there a process for their acceptance that can be followed when a property is in immediate need of preservation so it doesn't fall down? What grants are the most attainable for immediate preservation? And can someone give us a roadmap to follow? As this is dealing with the church that's hoping to be preserved is in a proposed historic district. And they've started the process, but not sure how long that would take. But they're having immediate issues with the church, looking like it's in danger that it could be, quote, falling down. So Jeff, Stacia, Chris, because I know this, Chris, I know National Register isn't your purview, but because MHC does oversee that. I don't know if you want to jump in, Jeff and Stacia, any insight for this particular issue of a church in a proposed historic district that seems in immediate danger of some structural issues?
Sure, I can take a stab. I think that's a great question for Chris of what is the typical timeline for some kind of beginning the nomination process to National Register, reviewing it at MHC. And I know it's a long process because it's a rigorous process and the National Park Service is involved. It's not just state staff. So that's the time horizon on that is, can be long, and I'm not sure that there is any way to expedite it, but Chris, maybe you might have more insight.
Okay, sure, I'll try to cover some of those things, and certainly whoever the caller is or the email poster can contact me to get some things started as well by email. So I think Erin usually puts my email up at the end of the preservation conversation. So for National Register, no, there's no streamlining certain projects through the National Register. It's usually a couple years for the process. So it is a long process. I mean, it's taken very seriously. I mean, the nomination itself is usually a professional consultant that's putting together the nomination. That nomination is reviewed, edited, has to be scheduled in for the State Review Board that meets quarterly, and then it goes to the National Park Service after that. So just getting that nomination together can take quite a bit of time. So that's going to vary a little bit. So if we already have an up-to-date, thoroughly documented inventory form, maybe you can draw a lot of things for an individual property off of the inventory form, and that might put down some of that time of writing the nomination. But it's definitely going to be a long process. And I guess the other part of that is that I noted when you're reading it, we want to get it on the National Register so it doesn't fall down. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, the National Register alone certainly isn't going to protect a property. Maybe one of the ways where the National Register could help a nonprofit or religious organization or municipality would be through our grant program. So when things are listed, that our Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund grant program would be a possibility there. So when I talk to you, I can certainly go over a little bit of that and then refer you to our grant staff at MHC, or if you want to just call our office and ask to speak with someone in our grant staff, you could also do that. So that way you'll go right to somebody that can answer all your questions about the NPPF program. I don't know, was there other parts of that question that I should cover?
No, sorry, go ahead, Jeff, sorry.
Oh, Chris, I was just going to say, yeah, and this is a case where the local, the strength might be in your local advocates and your local historical commission to really help in a situation like this. And, I think to Chris's point about National Register nominations and listing, it's a much more rigorous process than if you look at some of the older forms from 40 or 50 years ago. They can be pretty brief, and now it's just, I'm amazed by the amount of research and preparation that goes into these. So it's a real rigorous process, and that doesn't happen overnight. So, but something that might help is being in touch with your local historical commission, local historical societies or organizations on the ground to kind of rally the community around this cause and to help bring resources to it. It's just the thought off the top of my head.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Chris.
Those are really good points.
It looks like a person came back and said they were specifically looking for resources that were available while someone was in the process of applying. They understand the process takes years, but the need for physical attention is immediate. So this is probably maybe a case where they may not be eligible for MPPF at this point. But I would, as Chris suggested, I've moved the slide, so Chris's email is up. Or contact MHC and see about, talk to somebody at the grants division. We also have, we have a preservation conversation that's saved, that we did a few weeks ago, it might be a month or so ago now, where we went into some MHC grant programs and MPPF was one of them. And I know if your community has a Community Preservation Act, giving to historic houses of worship has been a little more scrutinized as of late, so that may not be available to you at this point. But Jeff, Stacia, or even Chris, do we know of any resources that could be available if a property is, let's say, it's not located within a local district or on the National Register at this point? Any other ideas for sources of funding that people could be directed to? It sounds like they're going through the process, though.
Yeah, I don't know what the future for this building is, what their plans are. Is there a plan to adaptively reuse the building in some other way? If not, well, I mean, if it's basically sounds like it's either vacant or somewhat abandoned right now. I mean, one of the main things is just thinking about, okay, how is this building going to get used in the future? Is there some sort of viable use that the building can be converted to? And if it's a building that has a lot of meaning to the community, then I think trying to put together some sort of local fundraising possibility is one of the best options. I mean, when I drive around and I see out in front of certain buildings just a local fundraising effort, and it's the thermometer, and it shows how much money they've a big sign with a thermometer, and it shows how much money they've been able to raise so far and what they need to get to. I mean, I see those as effective. I'm really surprised by some of those thermometers when I see how much local money has been raised to rehabilitate some of these properties.
And it may be that waiting until the nomination is totally complete and the property is actually listed, it may have already been determined to be eligible, in which case that that step in the process may open doors to sources of funding as well. So in other words, don't feel like you have to sit back and wait until the building is actually on the register before you can start raising funds, or that is, even though that is the final step in the process, there may be an intermediate determination that could support your request for funds from historic preservation sources.
I think thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jeff. And I think that's, Chris, that's a great point. And I think it goes back to don't discount the impact that local fundraising can have. And I think it just kind of goes back to reinforcing the idea that the real power is the real power in preservation comes from local advocates. It's from people in the community. It's from you saying what's important to you and your community. And organizations like Preservation Massachusetts and MHC, we play more of a supporting role. So we're not going to come in and, you don't have to wait until you're officially recognized. If it is important to your community and it's in danger of falling down, rallying local organizations, and you're right, those thermometers, having a visual for how much do we need to raise to do some work on the on a particular building, don't discount the power of word of mouth and public and local sentiment too. So you have a local advocacy. You have really all the power and all the oomph. And when you reach out to our circuit riders, they're going to be working in a supportive capacity for you, and not coming in and doing telling you what's historic or what, not doing it for you, but really in a supportive role to support your efforts and what your community has said is important. So local fundraising is a great option. One more question, another question we have is, as someone new to this venture, what kinds of issues and problems should be addressed to circuit riders, and what should be addressed to MHC? So, Jeff or Stacia, do you want to talk about what you guys would mostly be dealing with, and then Chris can chime in with what the questions that should be directed more towards him and the Mass Historic Commission?
I guess, as you know, as I say to folks, is we are Preservation Massachusetts is a statewide nonprofit organization. We're not a regulatory body, so things that do relate to regulation are best addressed to the Massachusetts Historical Commission. But as a nonprofit organization, our missions include education and advocacy. So those issues that pertain to either of education or advocacy are things that we could certainly help with.
And I think we pretty regularly, I think one of the ways that we can help is to direct you, if the issue is more appropriate for MHC to deal with, to the right person at MHC. Because, there's, as Chris has noted, there's many departments or divisions within MHC, the grants and his local government. There's just a lot of folks there, and we have a pretty good sense of, what division of the office might be most helpful with any issue at hand. So I don't think it's ever a bad idea to start with us. And if it's something that Stacia and I think really needs to get bumped up to the MHC level, that we can direct you to the most appropriate person there.
Sure, and I'll just add, there's going to be overlap in terms of a number of the questions, but I would say the things that I'm most apt to take on are things that do relate to local commissions. So more, as Stacia said, anything that's related to a local bylaw, local ordinances, demolition delay, establishing local historic districts, administering local historic district bylaws and ordinances, things like rules and regulations that local commissions deal with. The general sense of community-wide historic preservation planning is really kind of where what I would say I cover the most, in just terms of how local historical commissions are supposed to be considering how they identify, document, evaluate, and protect historic resources throughout the whole community. So I think that's probably anything that falls in that realm of historic preservation planning. General historic preservation planning tends to head over to me, but again, there might be overlap in terms of the kinds of things that a circuit rider could offer you for some guidance as well. I'd say circuit riders would probably tend to be more site specific than I am. So I tend to be more general in terms of working with commissions, because it's more historic preservation planning. And one of the things that I really can't do is when somebody says, can you direct me to an architect that would be good at this, or a contractor that would be good at fixing the slate roof, or an attorney that could do this. I work in state government, and I can't provide any of those referrals, because Preservation Mass is a statewide nonprofit organization. They actually have a list, and they're going to be able to say, yeah, you could contact this person here that's in your area. So that works well for a difference between the two.
And thank you very much, Jeff, Stacia, and Chris. And there is collaboration, there is overlap. I mean, we'll get Chris emailed us a few weeks ago on a couple of issues, and shared some with circuit riders. And if we get questions, we'll forward it onto Chris. So there is this collaborative relationship back and forth, and it really works well. Like Chris said, he can't refer an architect or a contractor because of his role in state government. we can't make determinations of eligibility, but we complement each other really well. And I just want to thank Chris again for being on these preservation conversations with us every week. It's it's wonderful to have him on representing MHC, and even though he does tend to be the one that we reach out to and ask the most questions to sometimes, it's a great collaborative relationship, and I think this is it's very very telling of how preservation works really well when it's when we're all it's collaborative, working together, and we're all after the same thing here. So just thank you very much, Chris, for tuning in every Wednesday for 14 weeks almost in a row. And Chris has also been great at helping us come up with some new potential preservation conversation topics and what would be useful, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So we still have about 10 minutes left if anybody else has any additional questions, or I can see if Jeff and Stacia or Chris have any other final thoughts. Nope. But I think.
Sorry there.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, no, sorry, I was muted and talking, which doesn't work very well. So, but I just quickly wanted to echo my thanks to Chris for being involved in these. It's been super helpful to have his participation and the perspective of MHC in this. And I think one of the great things about this whole process is that we've begun these discussions with Chris and among ourselves about, well, what trends are we seeing? What kinds of cases are coming up over and over again? And for example, one of the sort of hot topics recently has been, a lot of requests for help with imminent teardowns or dealing with a demolition delay process in some communities. And, we found that even though the economy has slowed down somewhat because of the COVID-19 situation, there's still stuff happening out there, and processes are still going along, and clocks are ticking on demolition delay timeframes. And so, this stuff doesn't stop during these periods where we can seem to be scrambling a little bit in terms of how we're responding to them. So I think this whole process, as I said, of collaborating with Chris and hearing from folks from across the Commonwealth during these conversations has given us a kind of nice perspective, a bigger perspective on some of the more statewide trends that are happening at the moment. So that's been very useful.
Thank you, Jeff. That is really true. And then another collaborative thing, and again, creating more resources that the circuit riders and Chris can point you to is we have Chris has actually put a page up on the PM website, a local commission resource library that has a lot of documents that are very useful, model bylaws, all sorts of things that are helpful for local historic commissions. And if you're on a historic commission and you haven't checked it out, it's on our website, easily accessible. But that's been another great collaboration where we can provide, the forum, the space for Chris to be able to, and MHC to be able to have this information that makes it readily accessible to anybody in the Commonwealth, but also I know our circuit riders will refer back to that too. And also another thing, if you're looking for certain resources that you're really not seeing on the Preservation Mass website, we really, the website is there to assist anybody and everyone who is involved or interested in historic preservation. But also the staff uses it quite frequently too. So if there's things that you would like to see on there, or as the slide has said for the past several minutes, suggestions on future presentations, whether it's a preservation conversation or a workshop that you would be interested in having. Looking forward to that time when we will be able to do workshops and gather in person again, whenever that will be. My email is up here, and then also Chris's as well. Chris has a lot of really great workshops that he puts on all around the Commonwealth. So looking forward to the days when we'll be able to get back to having those and promoting those. So I think unless anybody else has any other questions, I think, well, it's about 6 minutes before, but
Erin, I'll just mention the collaboration on the workshops that Stacia's really been taking the lead on some of the regional workshops in Western and Central Mass. So even though I've done regional workshops for the whole time I've been at MHC. In developing some of the workshop in the western part of the state with the regional planning agencies and Stacia, and then same thing in Central Mass. We've really been able to have a lot more speakers come in by collaborating together, that it's not just me doing the workshops, it's actually lots of different speakers. And it's also been a really good collaborative process, because my email list is really just the local commission members, and where Preservation Mass has a much greater email list, a much broader group of people on your email list. It's been great to be able to have workshops that draw in a lot of people that I usually don't bring in just by myself. So I think those have been really successful.
And I agree, Chris, and the collaboration with the regional planning agencies has been fantastic. That's another case where working together and having colleagues in other agencies has made those programs really strong. And the Western Massachusetts Historical Commission Coalition has been meeting several times a year for the last 6 years, and many of the presentation PowerPoints from presentations are also uploaded to the Preservation Massachusetts website. So if you go in and look under, those presentations can be accessed. One in particular that might be helpful to one of the folks who sent in a question related to churches is that in June of 2019, we did in Great Barrington have a presentation looking at churches and looking at adaptive reuse projects related to churches, which included a speaker from Partners for Sacred Places. So that might be a presentation and collection of documents and resources that might be helpful.
Thank you, Chris, for bringing that up. It had kind of gone into my head earlier in the conversation, and then it went back out of my head. But to bring up the regional collaborations that Stacia is very involved with in her region. But thank you very much for bringing that up. And as Stacia said, those materials are available through the Preservation Massachusetts website, and we do post if there's going to be another. Their last meeting was held virtually. That recording is available, and I believe probably their next one will be held virtually as well. But we do put notices out using our email, or also be on our Facebook page and our website as well. So if you're interested, I don't know if we have a topic for I think it's in September. Is that right, Stacia?
It is in September, and it'll be looking at historic preservation projects that are connected in some way to transportation-related historic resources. And the date at this point, it will be a virtual meeting on Zoom hosted by the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. If anybody's interested in being put on the email list for notification, just send me an email and I'll be happy to add you to our email list, the meeting will be held on September 29th.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Stacia. And thank you everybody for attending and your questions. If you have any further questions or need additional help, you now have Stacia and Jeff's emails. Their emails are also available on the Preservation Massachusetts website. Just go to the Preservation Circuit Rider page, links to their emails right there, or on the staff contact page as well. And just to give you a little update, a little glimpse at what's coming down the road, we're going to continue with our summer bi-weekly schedule. So our next preservation conversation is going to be scheduled for August 5th. Working on finalizing a topic, and I'd like to get it finalized by the end of the week. If not, we will put something out early next week as to what that topic will be. I think it will be very interesting. I think a lot of people will be very interested in it. August 19th, we are going to have a session on how to identify, document, and evaluate stone walls in historic landscapes. This is a little bit of a build off of our New England historic stone walls conversation that we had in late June. We're going to be joined by guest speaker Jeff Howery, who's actually going to show us, among other things, how to use LiDAR technology to find where historic stone walls are mapped. And then hopefully by that time we'll have a good sense for where we're going with our fall schedule. And I think we have some interesting possibilities for conversations coming up down the road. And then also there's, if you go to our preservation conversation page on the PM website, there is a link to a survey, so you can tell us how we're doing, if you like the format, if you'd like to, what you'd like to see for future conversation topics, all of that wonderful stuff. And then just an invitation, you can connect with Preservation Massachusetts, our website, Facebook, Instagram. All of our emails are available on our website, and if we don't know the answer, or the circuit riders don't know, or staff doesn't know, we usually know someone who does, and we can connect you to them. But so once again, a huge thank you to our wonderful circuit riders, Jeff and Stacia. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Chris, again, also for being on and for every week and representing MHC and being there to collaborate and support these great conversations that we've been having. Thank you everybody for attending live or watching on YouTube. It's now 11 o'clock. We all hope you have a great, wonderful rest of your day and rest of July, and we'll be back on August 5th. So thank you very much. Have a great day.